Boom! This is why Kobe Smith. Welcome to Common Sense. I'm joking. Hello, I'm Kobe Smith, and welcome to Common Sense. Can I repeat that? I didn't say Smith. I said Smith. There's a difference. Hello, I'm Kobe Smith, and welcome to Common Sense.
Hey guys, I'm Kiona McKay. Welcome to Common Sense.
Hi everyone, my name is Cassandra Ford and welcome to Common Sense.
Hi, I'm Chevy Devonish and this is Common Sense.
Hi guys, it's Gabrielle Ben and this is Common Sense.
Hey, my name is Sarfaz Yakub and you're now tuned into Common Sense. Don't be a dunce. Have sense.
Investments can't surround yourself with bare silly friends. Watch Common Sense with Matthew.
Can we talk for a minute? Girl, I want to know your name. Good night, everybody. Welcome to Common Sense Season 2, Episode 1. And I am very grateful to have each and every one of you tune in. And I want to encourage you guys right away to share the live stream. Invite your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, your side piece. And rock and come in with your family and friends. Tonight we're discussing dating and finance, relationships and finance, and everything as it revolves around that area. And we know that Valentine's is coming up in 4 days, and we want to provide you guys with some important pointers to navigate this season and your entire life. And with me tonight are some very amazing people, and you'll get to know them as we go along in the show. So, in the world in general, money is the number one reason for breakups in relationships, number one reason for divorce in marriages, as well as the number one reason for friendships being destroyed. And I would always say money is just not about economics and finance and math and knowing this number and that number, but most of money is about your emotions and about your mental framework. So tonight we want to begin a series that focuses exclusively on our emotions and our finances. And tonight we're going to be laying the foundation in a sense of what is to come. And we're going to be starting on the dating scene. So lock in and let's get ready. Now, we're going to begin our conversation tonight just finding out about our guests and where they came from and particularly what was their financial situation like growing up. So we're going to start off with my boy Kobe. We're going to come around the proverbial desk and hear from our guests. So Kobe, what was your experience like as it relates to money growing up?
So first, thank you for having me, Matthew. I came from a fairly middle-class, middle-income household. I grew up with my mother. She was a single parent, and she really tag-teamed with my aunt, who was also middle-class, middle-income. And we weren't privileged, but we lived decently in terms of we were able to afford the things that we needed, not want. Because that could be conflated sometimes. And so in terms of ensuring that my educational needs were met, even though sometimes those needs could have been a bit too much, but those basic needs were met: education, food, of course. Food is my
Your love.
clothing, shelter, occasional travel. Those things were met. So I would say fairly decent where my needs were met.
Cassandra?
Same for me. I grew up in a two-parent household, two incomes, middle class, but of course not rich, but we were able to maintain a certain lifestyle. I was comfortable, and yeah, that's basically it. Comfortable.
Kiona?
All right, so I grew up with both my mother and my father. My mother, well, both of my parents owned businesses, but we were more or less middle income. I was never left wanting for anything as I grew up. I mean, we weren't rich, of course, but we could afford our basic needs. I never traveled until I was probably in UG. So that's things we probably should think about today. Yeah.
Sherry?
I grew up, I don't think my situation was as comfortable as some others, but we did have a place to stay. Both parents, you had the basics, clothing, food, shelter, but my upbringing was a bit more interesting. So for example, we lived in a house whenever it rains, you gotta go get the buckets and the basins, and you know exactly where to put them because it's been happening so often. Situations like that, basically, things got progressively better over a period of time, but and you were able to do everything that you needed to do, but quite often you had to stretch the resources that you had. So for example, when I was doing my first degree, sometimes I would get $1,000 a week, and that was for transportation to go to UG and then to come back, and not straight home because they had to stop off at North Road and then walk to North. But it was survivable.
Beautiful. Gabby?
Well, I grew up in a single parent household with my mom, and for I want to say like a good majority of my life, we moved from house to house because like although my father was present, he wasn't like present, so she had to like do most of like the child rearing and getting the money and so forth. So first we would live in with my cousins, and we used to sleep on the floor, and they would just sleep on bunk beds, and then we moved to my grandmother's house, still sleeping on the floor. So I feel like until I reached to primary school is then when we finally got a house of our own and stuff like that. But I want to say my father after a while started to chip in and so forth, and that's when my life I'd say got a bit more comfortable, and you know, in terms of school fees and university fees and so forth. So yeah.
Beautiful. So fast?
Thank you, Matthew. Before I get to that topic, let me just take a minute to congratulate you on recently completing your studies. So good stuff. Now, as it relates to the question, I came from a household where my father, he basically took care of everything. So I didn't know the value of money until I was much older. He instilled one maxim in me, and that is, if you want something, you must go out there and get it, right? Nobody's going to bring it on a silver platter to you, right? So growing up, that's what I had in mind constantly, but never really in a sense where I felt like I didn't get anything, because, you know, parents always try their best to make ends meet, to give you everything that you deserve. So it was comfortable, but as I got older, I realized that, you know, it wasn't as comfortable as they made it seem, right? So.
Excellent. Before we get deep into the topic, I want to ask you a question. You mentioned that you had everything that you wanted, basically, growing up. Mm-hmm. Does that affect the type of man that you potentially looking to date or be in a relationship with? He has to have everything because you already had everything.
All right, so me having everything is very much relative. I think everybody's experience is different when it comes to money. When I say I had everything, is that I didn't have to go outside my household looking for a job. I didn't need to go outside of my family, my immediate family, asking my friends or my other family members some money or that kind of thing. So when I say that never was wanting, that's what I meant. As in terms of when it comes to men, I work, so I'm pretty comfortable as a young adult growing up. So I don't necessarily look to a man for subsistence, but obviously he has to bring something to the table because obviously I'm bringing something to the table.
Beautiful. Now, gender roles have shifted over the past decade or two. When we were children, predominantly the males were the providers for families. But as you mentioned, you're working. You have two lawyers here, or two lawyers in a sense. But women are dominating the workforce now, and they're not as reliant on men for provision. So I want to ask you guys, how has that shift in the gender roles affected relationships, particularly as it relates to the financial aspect of relationships? Anybody can answer.
I think Kobe is a good person to talk about it. This is your area.
Of course, as you've said, Matthew, of course, gender roles would have shifted because women are now, well, women have the opportunity to work freely. I mean, it's their constitutional right to work, the right to work. I mean, before we know that women didn't have the right constitutionally to work. And so those rights were challenged and all that. And so women have the right to work now. But I think in terms of the change in gender roles, because women are able to work and contribute meaningfully to their homes, their families, children, and community, in that way, we see nationally, globally, that women are now providing in a lot of homes, especially where, well, when I was brought up, I didn't know about a man leading our home. It was always women led my home. And that's why I really feel that, yes, of course, we need men in our society, but I feel that I grew up okay without a man in the home, really justifying and leading. Because, of course, it wasn't perfect, but I think that a lot of women would have demonstrated that they have the ability to work, they have the ability to earn, and they also have the ability to demonstrate that to their children. And so I think my mother did a fairly good job with me and my brother. And that's why I think in that way, it has really changed. Of course, certainly, there is this kind of contradictory thing in my mind where even though the gender roles have changed, you have some women who know, I mean, women talk a lot about, and also men as well, because I'm part of that field. We talk about rights and justice and equality, but I think when it comes to contributing or financing or dating, there's kind of like this thing where
Time stood still.
yes, you want to talk about gender equality, and yes, you want women's empowerment, but you talk about independence, but it has to be the man pushing all the resources in some cases in the relationship. And so I think in that way it's kind of contradictory in that sense.
Any of the women want to respond to that?
You're okay, you see him itching to make a contribution.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's a bit contradictory, but my standpoint and my opinion on that is that, I mean, you can only empower people who want to be empowered. That's one. Two, yes, a lot of people believe in gender equality. I more believe so in equity. I believe in proportion. For example, if both of us are working, we live in the same house, obviously if you make more money than me and making less, I don't think we should be 50-50. It should be proportionate to what we make. But yeah, everybody has their own relationship as it comes to money, and people obviously will have their own views on how to spend.
Excellent point you just brought out there, and that is what I'm going to use to really open up the conversation. I'm earning $500,000 a month.
Congratulations.
Hypothetically speaking, right? She's earning $750,000 a month. She might be a minister, because I like ministers, right? Right? But
oil company.
Or she's working at Exxon or one of those big companies. We're going out on dates. We're in a relationship. Time to pay the bills. Time to pay whatever expenses we have. Should the bills be split 50-50, given that she is earning significantly more than I am, or should she pay more given that she's in a better financial position than I am?
Well, you working for, I think any of y'all could pay the bills because that's some substantial salaries, but I think a couple of things. One, now I'm usually accused of being a bit conservative, and I think this is also a conservative view. If I offer to take you out, then I always expect to pay. I have no expectations of you paying, and there've been times when people offer to pay in various circumstances, and I may, depending on the circumstances, I may say no, it's completely fine, or in other circumstances, I may say okay, cool. So I think it depends on some factors like that. So, because if I'm saying, especially if you're not in a relationship, if you're dating, and I say, you know what you're doing, let's go such and so place, I'm prepared to pay, and I want to believe that that really should be the situation across the board. Of course, if you're a man, no, let's forget those salary figures for now, hypothetically. There may be situations in which you're not financially well off, or you're not even financially stable as a guy, but there's a girl that you like and you want to spend some time with her. You want her to take her someplace nice, but you can't afford to do that. How then is that handled? You can approach her about going 50-50. In my view, you should never wait until you get to the place, eat the food, and then ask the girl, can you go 50-50 with me? It's also different if she asks to take you out. I would actually verify, because there are some women, if they have to take you out, then they are going to pay. There are very many women I know who are like that. But there's also some women who, it doesn't matter if I ask or if you ask, you pay if you're the guy. So all of those things need to be clarified. There are a lot of persons who are uncomfortable with these conversations, but I always say get it out in the open at the beginning. So it depends on these variables, I think. But generally speaking, I don't think it matters who pays or even if both parties pay. It depends on the parties and their individual circumstances. You know,
Add to that, right? That's a very good point. But I think that as it relates to the gap, like for example, she's working 750,000, you're working 500,000. If you decide that you want to go down that road whereby you split this bill, what you can do is use a percentage model. Don't go 50-50 on the bill, right? So for example, use simple numbers for clarification purposes, right? Let's say you're working 40,000 a month and she's working 60,000 a month. Together, that's 100,000. Now, she's contributing to 60% of the income and you're contributing to 40% of the collective income. So when you get the bill, she pays 60% and you pay 40%, if you understand what I'm saying, right? So you won't go 50-50, but you're going according to your paycheck.
that makes sense.
But somebody earning more doesn't necessarily mean that they actually have more money than you. So I could be earning 750 while you earn 500,000, but I have more responsibilities than you. So when all is said and done, I would probably have less money than you. So how does that work out?
That's why we need to have the conversation so that we know firsthand, like who has what, who can do what, and what money you're willing to expend.
Conversation is key.
Conversations are key, and I think that couples that are thinking to go into the next stage, for example, you jump in from relationship to marriage, something that you need to discuss is how much is the person earning, right? How much does the person owe, and how much or what does the person own, to get an idea. So you don't just go in and then you realize this person has 10 million in student debt, right? So you're working 750,000, but everything is going towards that.
I think most people look at the income and not what you owe.
Yeah.
I think it's also about living between, within your means, because a lot of times, guys as well, and I've been someone who used to do that years ago when I first started on the dating too. I think sometimes you would like to impress this young woman, and you say, okay, let's go to X place, and you know that okay, you have the more money to go to X place, but then in terms of surviving for the rest of the month, it's challenging. And so people really need to, especially young men, and women as well, partners in relationships, I think you need to understand what really works best for you within your circumstances, but also to understand that dating and even relationships, or enjoying dating and relationships, it's really not just about fancy dinner dates. We dress up and we go to Hardmanson Lodge, or I don't know, what other place. What other place do you go? Bistro? Maybe you go to Bistro. That there are other ways to enjoy each other. And I think whenever we think about dating and finance, we think about it in more short term. We think about it when paying a dinner bill or a lunch bill. But we don't think about longevity or in a very sustainable way. Because, for example, if we're going to decide, okay, we're going to go out every single month or every 2 weeks, and we're going to go to Marriott, Bistro, Pegasus, wherever else people go, and you add up that amount of money, especially because now we have high inflation rates and whatever, on average, depending on what you take, let's just average, you might pay like $10,000 on average per outing, per dinner. And so if you add all that up, if you have plans to do things with this person, maybe you want to buy a land because land perhaps now is more readily available, even though people can't necessarily afford it, because availability doesn't mean you can access it. But I'm thinking about using resources or using finances in a very sustainable way to say we're not just going to look at short term, but in the medium and long term, that there are things that you want to do. You may want to land, you may want to buy a vehicle, you may want to, I don't know, do other things.
Matthew, before we move on, I think Kobe opened in a very important point that we need to dwell, that we should dwell on a little bit. And that includes socialization about money and planning. I tell young guys, if you don't have a job, don't get a girlfriend. Today, I tell them that.
You're walking, no. You're joking, no. You're stealing, no. You're dealing, no. You're looking for hun, plenty hun, boy. You're looking for hun. You're going to get hun, boy. Why you want to marry? You don't have no money.
People may have varying views, but this is why relationships cost money. And you may have things that are imperative now which require your money. So unless you can find a girl who is okay with, for months on end, not going out, but who is okay with just coming by you cooking her something, y'all watch a movie and something like that, then just don't go on dates. Society has socialized men into believing that they are compelled to, when they're dating a woman, you go to a nice place, go out and eat at least. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Marriott or somewhere else. And that you do things. So for example, she wants a dress, buy her a dress, help her do her hair or nails. And the socialization is so potent that women also believe the same thing. If a man is with you, he ought to be contributing to some aspect of your life. Otherwise, he's no good man. It doesn't make sense. And that is problematic for several reasons. A lot of men who feel entitled to women feel entitled because of the quote-unquote investments they make. And you see a lot of them say it all the time, I invest so much money in you, blah, 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 blah. So they feel entitled to sex, they feel entitled to time, because society tells them. And even women say this sometimes. How you want to be with me and you're not giving me no money, or how you want to get sex and you're not giving me no money. So then the relationship seems transactional. And because it's transactional, he has expectations based on those investments. So I think we need to remove completely some of the influences that socialization has had on both men and women, what dating is and how finances are to be used in dating. So that men don't feel compelled to the point of self-destruction. Because like Kobe says, he's going to take a girl to a very nice place and he can't pay his transportation to get to work, can't buy food for the next 2 weeks, but at least she's impressed. But that does nothing. And the point that raises is the importance of budgeting. You budget for dates. So, all right, we can go. So you budget for that. In your budget, you have miscellaneous fees. Yeah. So you budget. I want to take my girlfriend or the girl I'm dating out 2 times this month. So if we go hard at one particular point, we will go to Marriott or somewhere else. But you're not gonna have too much money left back, so we can go somewhere like Church's, KFC, or World Cocktail, where that is not too expensive. But budgeting is important because, like as Kobe also said, especially as a young man, there are things that I want to do. I want a house, I want a car, I want to study some more, and these things cost money. So if I'm having a relationship which compels me to be spending $40,000 a month every month, that doesn't make financial sense to me. And if that is what you have to do, then it's best to just not do it. And men, I think, and I'm speaking for men, not hitting women, of course, men have to be comfortable or start being comfortable with just not being in relationships if they find that it's too financially onerous, because you self-destruct if you do.
Beautiful point. Now, quick question on that topic. Should a man be dating if he's broke? Because you mentioned that if a man is not financially stable, you would advise young men not to date. Yeah. And I 100% agree with that. So can we say, like, as a man, if you're not financially stable, just don't date?
It depends.
Putting that woman through.
And yourself.
And yourself.
More importantly, yourself.
That is it.
But it depends. It depends.
Go ahead, Gabby.
I think a woman would value honesty, honestly. If you tell her upfront, like, look, I don't have this amount of money to be carrying you here, there, and there, or to do this and this with you, it's the onus would be upon her now to say, like, okay, I will, and when I enter this relationship or I start dating you, these are the things I expect, will be expecting, so that if you're upfront, well, I can speak for me, if you're going to be honest and tell me that this is your financial capabilities or status, then I know what I should be expecting. If those are not my standards, then I have to say bye, dear, you know?
I think that's a good point. I think it's really a matter of being real, being realistic, because I disagree with the view that broke men can't date, because I wouldn't say broke. I mean, if you're in secondary school or high school, then I don't entirely think that that's brokenness.
Yeah, but
just
I won't-
feel like
I won't
it's your
consider-
inability to be independent. Which is
Yeah, but I won't even consider high school
Good.
anything
No, but
part of this conversation.
Fine. Because I mean,
Okay.
people date in sixth form. I think that that's high school, and I think that you're at a place where you want to date. But here's my point: putting aside high school or teenage
I
years,
think he's talking about lashing again, you know.
people, we run away with this idea that when it comes to dating, it's the central part of it is money, and the central part of it is affordability and people's ability to impress. But there are a lot of women who their men are rich men, but their men don't treat them good. And you have some broke men who probably got a good job.
But that's a different point.
No, it's not a different point. It's actually neutralizing the argument that you have a large portion of society of broke men who you're saying don't date because you don't have money. But there's some women who it's not about money, because some women don't mind paying dinners for them. But what some women want is a man who can love them right, who can kiss them right, who can be consistent. And so I really feel it's kind of disappointing that we're gonna just say don't date because you can't afford. Because on the basis of that, we're saying he shouldn't date because the responsibility of making this relationship work financially is his responsibility. And that's false in a way, in my opinion.
I think it comes back to the point that Gabi was making, that you have to have these communications, and it needs to be something that is mutually agreed on, right? Can't have one party thinking one way and the other party thinking another way and go in two different directions.
I just want to clarify, because I get the feeling that question stemmed from what I said. Now, the reason I said I advise young men, if you're not in a reasonably comfortable place financially, you shouldn't date. It really had nothing to do with women. It has a lot to do with you as a man. Yeah. Now, you're gonna want to do things. You're gonna want to go places, and she's also gonna want to go places, and you may not be able to do that. Yes, she will do it sometimes, but you don't always want the burden to have to be on the woman. So, unless you have some amount of extra funds to put toward some kind of interaction, even if it's just transportation, because there was a time I couldn't even afford transportation. Like I was telling you before we started, I'm not gonna mention the young lady's name, right? And she was working, you know, we would go to the gardens, sit down, talk, and then walk from the gardens to the bus park. How much, South Bus Park, how much girls you think, especially in these days, gonna do with you? No, right? And then, yeah, fine. But then there are a whole lot of other things that come with that quite often. So my advice is don't put yourself through this now, right? Forget the woman for now, but don't put yourself through this now. Focus on something, work on yourself, bring yourself to a certain place, and then when you can afford, when you have some additional finances that you can put toward this, then fine. I'm not saying that all women are looking for is finances, because that has not been my experience. If that was the case, and I perhaps would have never dated in my earlier years. There was a particular relationship that I was in that I actually probably went out 4 times over a period of about 2 or 3 years because I just could not afford to go anywhere. I had a job, but bills were beating you. And then you had to pay for education and all these other things. So it was, and I understood it was difficult for her as well. Because forget going places, transportation, and sometimes it's late. You don't want to go in a bus at certain places, or there's no bus running where you are at certain places. So taxi, it gets, Keon is laughing at me, but it gets complex and complicated. But I'm not, to clarify, I wasn't saying that there are women who all they want is a financial aspect of it. That's not what I was saying.
But what I'm going to say now is that financial responsibility or responsible financially is very impressive to me, because I can remember when I was really young. I'm not really young because you think I was in my teens, but in my early 20s, when I was first dating this guy, he was living with his grandmother. I was he was about 25. I was why don't you move out? I mean, I think he could afford to move out, so why not move out? And I pretty much forced him to move out. I wouldn't want to right? But now I'm older, and if somebody comes to me now and says they want to move from their parents' home and they don't have they don't make enough, I'm why are you going to do that? That makes no sense. It might as well just stay where you are, earn as much as you can, and then down the line you could probably think about doing that.
So now you realize the guy could have
see,
been saving and he could have gotten his land by now.
You see, I'm talking about these pressures. I'm talking about these pressures.
But the point to that as well is that I mean, like a guy like myself, I prefer older women, and that is also well, if you want to say that. But I think that that also poses a challenge, because if you are, I don't know. Well, when I started to date, I was 18 or 17, and this young woman was 20 something, and I always felt there was more responsibility to prove yourself than if the relationship was more horizontal, meaning that you're in the same age range. But even if now I'm 24 and I'm interested, if someone is, I'm 24 and the person is perhaps 27, 28, generally, there may be different outlooks on life. Because, for example, a 24-year-old may not want to be married at 24, but your girlfriend who's 27 or 28 may want to be married. She may want to have a house, and you may not be in the position to do that. And so even in determining...
Is she in a position to do that?
But then it comes back to the point where we put this focus on the responsibility on men, and it's also about redefining masculinity and understanding that it's okay for a guy not to be able to afford that, but it's all about being honest about your lack of affordability. But I say that to say that you need to understand whether the person you're with, who may be older, is able to understand that you are not at a place to do that, but also understand that they too have a responsibility to contribute to this partnership. Because if you're to decide that you're 24, the person's 28 or 29, they also would be part of the wedding. They also will be part of this home that you want to buy. And so they too have a responsibility to contribute.
Is the pressure that we as men face does it only come from the women, or does it also come from the fact that, especially if you're the type of guy that likes to date hot girls, quote unquote, and you know that there's a whole bunch of other men watching.
Yeah.
It might be other guys who are more financially stable than you are. I don't know if stabler is the word, but they're pursuing her. She's interested in you. Does that increase the level of pressure that you face now? All right, for me to to keep her or to maintain this relationship, I have to spend, because if I don't, one of those other guys that are waiting are gonna take your spot.
It depends.
Uh-huh.
So for me, if I gotta worry about how much I spend on you because you know other guys who can do better are looking on, and that's an issue, you can go, right? Because I know about that life. But where that comes from, it's not just us. It's again socialization. It's socialization. We feel insecure. She doesn't even have to do anything necessarily for us to feel insecure about guys who are more capable wanting her. You're with a woman, she's attractive. Guys are going to talk to her. Guys who are in a better situation than you are will try to talk to her. You spending more money will not fix the issue if that is an issue, right? Because the money wasn't the issue or would not have been the issue. And if you spend money to try to make her feel more secure, especially if you're putting yourself in financial ruin to do that, that is not a relationship. That is not a space you need to be in. So what a lot of men need to do is to become more aware and more resolute in their commitments to themselves, to be financially stable and to remain financially stable, and to not get themselves into relationships which can lead them astray. It is okay as a man to say, I am not able to afford a certain type of lifestyle, and a certain type of lifestyle that a particular woman would want. I am not hitting at a woman who wants a particular type of lifestyle if that is what she's accustomed to. That is fine. But it's also okay and necessary for you to realize that you're not able to sustain. You may be able to sustain it financially, but you have other things to do. You have, like me, I want to... Correct. I want to study like 4 LLMs. I can't afford to spend money behind you to ensure that you will not take on the other guy's advances. But even though I say that, I realize that it's difficult for some men to fight against because socialization is deep, conditioning is deep. Gabrielle said, your ego. A lot of times we hit guys, oh, it's just your ego, your pride, male pride, and we speak of it as a pejorative and we shame men for that. And I understand why it's done. But we do that without realizing that we didn't necessarily choose to be this way. When you get down to the base of it, which man wants to be emotionally insecure? Which man wants to be worrying about whether his lack of finances will cause his girlfriend? Nobody wants that, but it's in you. So we have to, I guess, develop a certain level of awareness about who we are and how those things affect us before we start trying to correct those things. But the short answer is absolutely no. Don't spend more to try to secure that relationship. If money is the issue and if money will likely attract her, somewhere else, then she should go.
I think, excellent point, Sylvie. I think the other issue that I've seen in my work, in terms of responding to gender-based violence, is that, of course, gender-based violence deals with power and control. And if you have a situation where a man he provides everything, food, clothing, shelter, rent, every single thing, and he realizes that this young woman is, inconsistent, she's not loyal, she has affairs with multiple men, that could be a recipe for disaster. And in terms of ensuring that we recognize that we need to challenge these terrible norms in our society and challenge the power and control that a lot of men hold, and a lot of people don't understand that a lot of women are trapped in relationships, not entirely physically trapped, but they're trapped in relationships mentally, emotionally, financially, because they're not independent enough to really step out and move out of a place of understanding that they can determine their own destiny and they can fend for themselves. And I think a lot of times in our society, we see a lot of women stay in abusive relationships, and people say, why the hell she don't leave the man beating her up every single night? But they don't interrogate to ask why exactly she's staying. It's the fact that she doesn't have a job, she didn't get to finish some level of school, and so she's not employable. And that's really part of the reason why a lot of women say it, because they can't really afford. And so we really need to move away from this understanding that it is a responsibility of this guy to pay for everything, and women should just sit back and just allow that, because that really contributes and that really incubates this culture and this cycle of violence that we're really seeing in our society that is really continuing unabated.
I think an important point you made there is that we should not allow our brokenness or our financial instability to dictate our decisions, because many times women see the red flags, see all of the patterns that they wouldn't want from their significant other, but because of their financial situation, and the man may be financially capable of providing for her and her children, particularly in older women, from the older generation, they stay there because they can get that financial security and a sort of a provider. So they subject themselves to certain situations which they otherwise would not have if they had the financial means. So I think it's very important that we take this time to encourage our young women, pursue your own academics, open your own business, become financially independent so that you don't have to necessarily depend on a man to provide for you, and sometimes subject yourselves to tough conditions.
But I think it's also important to tell men that your financial contribution in a woman's life does not give you stakes to her or an interest in her and her life. If you give a woman money, if you invest in a woman and it doesn't pan out, then it's a loss. As a matter of fact, if you give a woman money hoping to get sex, for example, and you don't get it, then it's a loss. It was a gamble, and you have lost. There are a lot of men who feel entitled because of that, their financial contributions. So, and you see it, and you hear it all of the time. Some of these cases recently with women who were killed. You look at Facebook and you look at the comments. People say, you know how much money this man put into this woman. You know how much. The guy that got a degree in certificate in psychology. Somebody was saying on Facebook that he gave her a house or something like that, and then she was. I don't know whether that is true, but this person saw that as, they say it wasn't justifying his action, but in essence, that is what they were saying. It's justified. The man give you a house, you cheat on him, your man trip out. That's understandable. That's what they were saying. So what we need to do as men, what men need to do is the mindset. If you make an investment, you're doing it because you want to make it, or you want to get something from the interaction. If you don't get it, then you just need to cut your losses and go, as opposed to feeling entitled. On the other side as well, what it also does to men is that I feel that to some degree, men do not value themselves the way women value themselves. So some women say, you can't get access to me, sex in particular, unless you're making some kind of financial contribution to my life, right? So sex is a bit of a commodity, it's transactional. But men don't expect anything in return. So men, generally speaking, have sex for little to nothing. There are some men who discriminate more as to who has access to their body, right? But women are told from a very young age, and even that is a bit problematic. You're special, you're important. No man should just be able to have access to you. That's completely separate. But there's someone who expect a man who is having sex with them to make financial contributions. Men don't expect the same thing. So, sometimes the question that I ask when I'm having conversation with persons, okay, but are you not enjoying the sex as well? Are you not a participant in the sex, and therefore do I also need to be paid? Do I need to get some kind of financial contribution for your access to my penis, for example? Because that is the idea. Was that permissible? Because that is the idea on the other side. So the unsaid or unstated opposite is that if the idea is that a woman's private part has monetary value and that you need to pay in order to get access to it, then the other side is your private part has no monetary value.
But whose fault is that?
Socialization.
That's deep. And I want to encourage men as well, as Chevy rightfully said, providing her. Sometimes you go to the club and a man buys a drink for the girl and he feels as though he's entitled to a back ball. You're not entitled to anything, right? Kobe mentioned earlier that finance is not the fulcrum of a relationship. And I want to bring up this Rihanna and A$AP Rocky situation. Because I saw my friend Alonzo was in an argument online, and there was a meme that said she had these billionaires in the past. She didn't get a child for any of them. Now she allows A$AP Rocky, who they call a major downgrade compared to the billionaires, even though he is a millionaire himself. And women were castigating. No, he's a millionaire.
Millionaire.
Yeah. Women were castigating Rihanna for having a child with him as compared to the billionaires, which to me is very silly because she has to know why she felt he was the right one. I mean, money is not the only factor or consideration in that decision. Maybe A$AP provides a certain level of emotional support that the billionaires couldn't.
Or sexual support, maybe.
Whatever it is, right? So I want to ask the women, what are some other factors or consideration that you guys would take in play when you're making a decision of who to date, who to be in a relationship? And what are your views on that entire Rihanna situation?
Can you first ask them if they would date somebody who makes less than them, substantially less than them, and then follow up with that question? I think that would flow. Wow. That would flow.
You see, the word that hit me is substantially. I can date somebody who makes less than me, but I don't know about substantially. To be honest, the substantial it hit me.
But you don't mind a guy who makes more than you, and you work for substantially less than you. Expect the guy to accept you when you.
No. He can, but I always pull my weight. So regardless of how much I am making, I would pull my weight in the relationship because I believe a relationship is a partnership. So going back to the same 750, 500, let's say I was the person making 500, he was making 750. I still gonna pull my weight like you, right? But of course, money is big for me because like Chevy and a lot of other persons would have mentioned, you set a certain standard for yourself and the lifestyle that I envision for myself, that I would have been actively working towards myself. I need a helpmeet, right? But aside from money, of course, somebody with a certain level of emotional intelligence, a person that has a healthy family life. I think family is very important for me.
Hold on, let her finish. I don't want her to forget anything. You sure?
Yeah,
you finished?
Yeah, well, the emotional intelligence, a healthy family life, ambitious, of course, and not just being ambitious, but actively working towards your goal, because I just can't accept I want to do X, Y, Z. I need to see some effort into getting where you want to be. But I honestly don't require a lot. Of course, loyalty, which is the biggest thing for me. You don't need to have too much money, but you need to be loyal. Because I got myself. That's the reality of it.
I will give an interesting scenario like recently happened to me. So I was talking to a guy. Obviously, I make more than him. And for some reason in his mind, because I didn't tell him well, I guess people would know if I tell him what I do, then they would be like, oh, well, you make? He's like, oh, I just make a little something, right? And somewhere along in his mind, like something clicked, like, and he's younger than me, something clicked, like, oh, she could probably be my sugar mommy. Yeah, right? So in a way, I eased off of that because that's not what I wanted for myself. I need you to pull your weight as well. because I'm not the only person that's going to be in this situation, wherever it is. But yeah, I do agree with
Cassandra.
About what you need in somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, but what she said, emotional support and emotional intelligence. What else?
Trying to pull out of the
All right, so we got emotional intelligence, a healthy family life, loyalty.
Honesty, that's one.
What I was asking is that how do you rate this? Like, for example, loyalty is the most important, then finances, or finances top of the chart.
Give us some ratings, basically. Your levels to this. What are the levels?
Loyalty.
Loyalty first. I would put finances.
Personality third.
They're on the same page.
Personality third, because you could be nice, but you can't be broke.
I wanted to go back to the ASAP.
Hold on.
Sorry.
Gabrielle, go.
You were still listening? Okay.
Okay, for me, it would be
Making less than you?
Substantially. That was the
Yeah, substantially less.
potentially. Potentially. It's a big potentially, because I will have to know the person and I have to meet that person and get to know them and so forth. And if they're ambitious and working towards a goal or something like that, then I will go ahead and date them. In terms of like what you look for in a person besides finances, I agree with many of the things Cassandra listed, but also a big thing for me is that, he has to be faith-based, like, godly and so forth. That's a major thing for me as well. So yeah.
I wanted to go back on the substantial. Because I'm thinking about myself right now.
Guilty.
No, I'm not feeling guilty. I'm thinking about myself right now with my boyfriend. Now, let's say I think my perspective would change depending on the period of the relationship. So maybe if we now start dating, no, right? But let's say we've been together for a certain amount of years, right? And at a certain point, my career took off and I ended up making substantially more than you. But you would have already shown me that you can provide for me, you're going to be there for me, and so on. I mean, I don't have any problem with, maybe putting more or pulling a heavier weight. But you would have had to show me that, were you in this position, you would have done the same for me. So, I mean, looking at it from that point of view, I probably would date somebody that makes substantially less. But once they have a proven track record. But like I said, even in the beginning, somebody making more money doesn't mean that you can't assist, right? I mean, and assisting does not necessarily mean financially only, because you're pulling your weight around the house, you're doing other things, it's still going to ease a little burden for me.
Can I jump back to the A$AP Rocky Rihanna thing? I think people just like to give opinions on people's relationships, especially people they can't meet or they would never meet.
The image of her.
Yeah, and I feel like people don't recognize that these people have a right to choose whosoever they want to. And I think we could all accept that Rihanna was someone who would have gone through a lot in her life, or not
Definitely.
just career, but her life. I mean, this was someone who had a relationship with Chris Brown, infamously, and suffered abuse, terrible abuse. And Chris Brown, people thought when this relationship first came out, it was maybe better than Beyonce and Jay-Z, but that's debatable. But people said, "Oh, this is Rihanna and Chris Brown. They look incredible together." But then you found out that Chris Brown was a terrible partner and terribly abused her. But Chris Brown also was a millionaire at that point. I think Chris Brown has more money than A$AP Rocky. Of course, Rihanna was with these billionaires. Well,
she was
I'm
with
not sure
Drake
it's
too.
one billionaire before, the guy from the middle. Where was he from?
He was a prince or king or something.
But again, I mean, we don't know. Perhaps A$AP Rocky treats her better. Perhaps, I mean, we know that she's a billionaire, he's a millionaire, but he gives her emotional support. He maybe sexually satisfies her, because that's also part of good relationships.
You consistent with this sexual satisfaction thing?
Perhaps, of course, it has to be that he's not abusive as the one that she would have had prior. And so I think we need to really move away from placing this whole talk about, or this whole expectation of financing or finances in the middle, and just think that people just need to be comfortable.
But it's difficult to do that because part of the value of a man, you're measured to some extent based on your finances. Your value as a man is based to some extent is tied to. Hold on, let me finish. Let me finish. I'm just saying that generally speaking, based on socialization, even now, even after we've achieved to some extent equality, and the idea that, or not the idea, but the reality that women can work and earn do what a man can do and earn as much as a man can. Women are judged by different things, but they're not judged based on, at least men, they're not judged based on how much they earn. And that's one of the reasons why, if we don't make a lot, it affects our pride and our self-concept, because society judges us based on how much we can make. And if you're not making a whole lot, you're not a high-value man, because high-value men are the men, that are in, and the men who tend to get more attention generally because they're seen as more valuable. So I agree with Kobe. I wasn't disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that we need to change that aspect of socialization, which ties a man's worth to his finances. Finances are important, but it doesn't define you. Or I should say it ought not, but it does.
I think there's a scripture that says, if a man can't provide for his family, he's worse than an infidel. And I think things like that would give credence to that notion that you're speaking about a man's worth being measured by his level of financial success.
Yeah, the irony of biblical teachings is this. I think many Bible verses have to be viewed in context. We were speaking of a context where women did not have suffrage, women did not and were not allowed education, they were not allowed to work. So the concept of the man being the provider was in that context, and it made sense in that context. That is not the context we're in currently, but there are many persons who, for one reason or another, maintain that status quo. So women, they now have suffrage, they can study, they now work. As a matter of fact, you will find more women in more classrooms across the globe. Your class had more women than men?
More women.
Yeah.
Same
thing, my class as well, right? There was one class that had 4 guys, 25 women. Women are taking over, but men are still expected to be the one who's to provide, and your worth is defined by your net worth. So if you don't have that, and the funny thing is this, including in dating, it has caused a shift in the dating spectrum, because women before, even in dating, they still do, but they control the gateways to sex in dating and in marriage. Before, decades ago, the cost for sex was marriage. If you wanted to marry a woman, if you want to have sex with a woman, you got to marry this woman. But things have changed so substantially now that there's a much smaller pool of men who are considered to be highly valuable and attractive based on their net worth and other factors. And these men don't necessarily want to get married. So you have more women who are willing to say, and the men are saying this, I don't want to get married, but we could still, have sex. Or, date, but not be exclusive. I'm gonna still do things for you. And there are a lot more women who are okay with doing that because these men are in positions where they can do more. And this is why I was saying earlier that it would have been interesting to have the perspective of someone who has substantially more. I mean, the way that I treat money is influenced by how I grew up, not having money. But it would be interesting to hear the perspective of someone who has a whole lot of money, who, even though they value money, they have more. So it's no issue to give more and to do more. Kobe was talking about the bare minimum being paying, giving your girlfriend a certificate to do her nails or to do her face. But for some guys, the bare minimum is sending your girlfriend on a trip to Barbados or Trinidad and Tobago or something like that. So.
Or Europe.
Now, I wanna, before we wrap up the conversation, you guys touched on the importance of communication and having certain conversations. Now, discussing money, generally speaking, is very taboo in not only Guyana but in the world. People would be more willing to discuss their sexual life, their everything else, except discuss their financial situation. How do you begin that conversation whereby you start to understand the person's financial situation? When do you start it? Do you start it on the first date? You wait until a few months have elapsed and then you try to get a bit deeper into their financial situation? How do you go about that conversation? One, in a delicate way, so that you don't offend or you don't turn the person off, in a sense, and when do you have that conversation? How deep do you go as well in that discussion? Do you discuss the person's debt? Do you discuss their salary? Do you discuss their investments? Whatever it is. How?
First of all, I don't want nobody else to ask me on the first date how much I make. I think that's a red flag for me. I think the first date is to discuss other things. But I think coming from that, I think that in terms of having those types of conversations, I think those conversations come from a place of you understanding where you want to go. If you want to build with a person, if you want to do things with the person in terms of growing. But I think that it's kind of a red flag in my mind if we're gonna meet for the first time and you ask me, "Oh, Kobe, here you work at X place. How much do you work for?" I mean, I don't wanna have that kind of conversation on the first date, especially if we don't even know if this is what we want to do or this is the path we want to go on. But then again, it comes back to you understanding and knowing what you want out of this engagement with this person. When I say engagement, I don't mean like you have a ring and you want to get married. I'm talking about like the process of dating someone or the relationship. Because some people feel like every person you date or every person you go out with means that that's the person you want to marry. That's not so. The people that you're going to have sex with that you're not going to date 2 months later on.
And you're going to speak for you.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who I would have had sex with that we don't even communicate. We don't even talk now. You probably blocked on social media. That was funny as hell.
Kobe's very toxic.
No,
you continue.
The point is this: people need to understand that relationships or relationships have levels, and you just need to know based on those levels what questions to ask and what avenues you want to go in, and to also understand that it's okay just to go out with someone one time. It's okay to just have sex with someone one time and move on. It doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong because you didn't get to the stage of talking about finances or talking about buying a land, because everybody's not at that place.
But I'm asking you when. You're telling me when you should not, but when?
I think I don't think there's a timeline. Okay. I think it's something natural.
Natural, okay.
I think it's when you're comfortable.
But if I'm to give like a timeline, I would say at least by the end, like a year, like 2 years, I feel like you should know how serious you want to be with somebody.
I don't think a time. I think what's more important is when you feel you want to get at least just serious to some degree. Because if you're Kobe, you could be having sex with someone for 2 years and still not want to get serious with them. I'm using him because apparently he does this type of thing. And still not want to get serious with them. And so how much he makes and how much the other person makes is completely irrelevant. You may want to know things like, okay, do you drive? So you understand things like transportation. Does he have to pay a taxi for you to go by him and for us to go out and things like that? Or can she do that for him? Things of that nature. But I think a more practical approach is to say at some point when you say you want to get serious, because then your lives will be tied closer to each other, and you may need to know more about the person's life to, for example, know if there's a need for you to help out, if you're able to help out in some instances. And then you have, there's levels after that, because even after you get serious, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm giving you $40,000 every month. So as we move closer to like engagement or even marriage, well, you absolutely ought to have that conversation before you're engaged. I would like to think. How much do you make? Because you're planning. How much do you make? How much debt do you have? What do you want to do, generally speaking? That will cost a whole lot of money. And I also want to know what are some of your views and your principles concerning money, because that will influence how you will treat money in marriage. And for me, that's very important because one of the things that I've seen and one of the things I've learned, sometimes it takes just 1 month for you to go from financial stability to financial ruin. We look at people on the road who don't have homes, and sometimes you think negative about them, or sometimes some people are 1-2 paychecks away. And even if you have $2 million in the bank, you don't know what can happen. Your wife gets ill, you get ill, something happens, and all of that goes in a month, and then you have nothing. So it's important to not just know the facts about that person, but also their habits, because that will determine, you said it when we started, the number one. When I read it, I think it was a number 2, but it seems to be the number 1 now cause of the end of relationships and marriages is either you can't agree on how to spend money, or you have very poor money management skills. And so
that's why I began the conversation asking, what were your financial situations like? Because I think there's a very important conversation that you need to have, especially if you have serious prospects of entering into something lifelong with the person. You ask them about their financial situation growing up, because many times the circumstances that we grew up in influence our financial habits and our financial decisions and our money management skills. So you listen to a person talk about their experiences growing up. Some of them might have seen their father hating their mother because of she spent too much at the market, or she didn't do this or whatever. And those things influence whether you're going to be a saver, whether you're going to be a splurger. So you need to have those conversations and find out these important things, whether the person likes to save, whether they like to spend, because
you need to observe. What are they doing now? And don't just ask, because sometimes people lie.
Right.
Observe.
The timing is tough, because if you allow a certain amount of time to elapse, you have already formed certain habits in the relationship, right? Some things you already laid the foundation, and then when we decide to talk about it now, then you want me to make a 180. What's gonna happen there? Mm-hmm. When we were dating or early on in the relationship, you were paying for everything, or we go to dinner, you paying for it all the time, and then now when we talking about it, from now on I want us to split the bill 50-50. It kind of, so you really have to think about it, but there's no specific time. You have to read the person, not only listen to what they say, but you have to analyze the individual, and you will know the right time to have the conversation. Because early on, of course, as Kobe said, I'm not going to tell you certain information and I don't even know where this is going. But you don't want to wait too long, and then you already set your habits, and then you have to divert.
You guys mentioned that finances is one of the main factors in your decision of a potential mate. What I found a lot lately, though, is that a lot of women are dating men who have unexplainable finances, as in the source of the finances, even the women themselves don't know where they're coming from. Do you guys have that conversation to find out, all right, is he doing drugs? Is he robbing somebody? Is he gambling? And
they're just scared that they get the money. And
do you care? Because, for you women here, might be different, but I've noticed that a lot of women nowadays don't really care once they get the money. What would you say to those young women, and personally?
Depending on your answer, the young women may have some things to tell you.
I care, because what if it's drugs money, right? And then in the blink of an eye, it all gets taken away from me.
Or you get shot.
Or I get shot. It ties in your dirty business. It directly impacts me. but I don't know what to say to them. I honestly don't know what to say to them. Your money needs to come from an honest source.
And that's what you say to them?
Your money needs to come from an honest source.
Well, they might very well take that. Well, they got some.
Hold on, let's hear from the other women.
I was gonna talk about money laundering because the honest source could be where you, in their
Wash the
mind,
money.
you wash your money and make it new. So
Yeah, Kira, the question.
you're interested in the answer.
No, I mean, he asked the women a question. So,
I don't know what to really say to them, but I'm just speaking from my experience, because I'm thinking like, if our lives are going to be tied together and based upon the profession I have, if you're not getting your money from an honest source, that can kind of affect my profession in itself, right? So I would prefer a bit of transparency.
Imagine Gabby on court round up, you know?
Yeah, but yeah, I could only speak, especially when your lives are tied together. So you can't just be taking demand money and then baps. Not only y'all could end up on the road alone, and you gotta decide, well, if he end up going broke, am I willing to stay with him at the end of the day? How am I even going to sustain this lifestyle I want to have? So when I think there should be these young women should consider like where the men are getting the money from. Yeah.
Kiana?
I feel like as a young lady, you have to decide for yourself if you're ride or die, because that's a ride or die situation, right? So, I mean, yes, you may want to chastise people and say, okay, you should probably get somebody who has an honest source of income, but that's not the case all the time. And maybe you're struggling and he comes like a savior and he says like, oh, you know, he could help a little bit. You're not going to consider his honest source of income. You just be like, chill out, and you're going to take the money to come. And you can't really like vex people for that. But if for me personally, I like Gabby said, you know, my profession will be hindered but by your source of income, if anything's to come through that. So that's something I would like to be aware of so I can make an informed decision if I want to go on with that.
I think it comes down to what you perceive as morally correct.
Right. Yep.
All right, final question before we wrap up. What are some financial red flags during the dating period, during the relationship period, that would cause you to want to end whatever it is?
Constantly asking to borrow money, especially if we just start dating.
ask him for phone credit on the first meeting.
Borrowing, like that's showing me that's a red flag. That's showing me you don't have, you know, some financial stability. Your habits, like terrible money management. I mean, if you come to me once and you explain that you're in a certain situation and you need this money, I'm gonna think long and hard, because I don't like to lend money. That's the truth. Because
what if he's paying you back every time?
No, I think that.
But I am not a bank. There is a bank for that. There is a bank for that.
He should be able to depend on you, though. I mean, you're the person that he's.
No, we're now starting.
I wasn't challenging
dating.
it. I just wanted to understand.
We're now dating.
Okay.
So why do you want to borrow? And then I'm gonna think, what are you really doing with this money? Because it can go back to the same money laundering and other, you know, fraudulent activities. But that's one for me, borrowing money. But when I say I don't like to lend money, it's because I don't like to jeopardize relationships, be it friendship or otherwise, because of money. I don't want to have to. I like you, and then I want back my money, and I gotta beg you. I can't deal with that. So.
Anybody else?
The inability of you to budget your money. Right? I mean, yes, you could come and borrow, but if you gotta say every time you broke you can't do this, something is wrong. Something is definitely wrong. If you can't say when the month comes, I'm putting X towards food, I'm putting X towards transportation and this, and then you spending like 50% of your salary sporting. You know, that's a red flag.
Sporting is essential, though.
Sporting sporting is essential, but
I was
if you're
joking.
doing
I wasn't serious.
I think when you say sporting, I would look at it as relaxation time. You need a time to take a break, right?
Entertainment.
But
Right.
not every week. But if is it that you're trying to keep up with your friends or something of the sort, then you can be spending your money like that. But I do think, even if you don't work for a lot of money, you still need to take some time. You don't have to spend 100,000 every time you go out. Go out somewhere cheap, right? But be creative. But if it's gonna be that you're trying to keep up with your friends, then that's a problem.
I think a red flag. I mean, they would have both listed out, I think, the main ones. But I think from a guy's perspective, I know there's some restaurants, and good restaurants that would have good training for their staff, depending on how they bring the bill. And so I know good restaurant or good customer service when the bill comes, it's being placed in the middle of the table instead of it come in my lap or in my hands. And so I think it's a red flag. Even if I say, let's go somewhere, I don't know, wherever it is. It could be wherever. Churches, castle, wherever. And if all the time, even if I initiate and I pay all the time and you don't even say
Offer.
Even if you don't have the money, you just say, let me take that.
She don't like you because women have money, right? Women have money.
Let me see the
spend their money after
effort.
that.
Like, I just find it so unattractive that you. And I've never had women like that. But like, I just find it so. No, the girlfriend that I have, she is good. She pays for the stuff. But I'm saying, generally, it's a red flag if you go every place, whether it's a supermarket or here or there or whatever, and like you don't even say, even if you want the wallet empty, show me that you're making an effort to go in your pocket. I say, are you?
But what if you said yes?
What if
What if she attempted and you said, all right,
no,
and she didn't have money? What you have done?
even if
You want to embarrass the girl?
no, I'm saying
You want to get embarrassed yourself?
something is wrong if you just don't make an effort. You never offer something wrong. We can't be thinking.
No, not necessarily, because I don't blame, and I understand that I'm cutting into your question, but I just want to address this. There's some guys who are offended
When women ask.
when women offer to pay, and there are some women who are aware of this. Now, right or wrong, that is a reality. There are some men who will get genuinely upset, so some women just never do it.
That goes back to the socialization.
Correct. And also, aside from that, there's just some women who think that, okay, if you offer to take me out, and I'm expecting that you're going to pay. And I don't think that is an unreasonable expectation. Some may still say, all right, you know what, you want me to help on this occasion? I don't think that if they don't, in those instances, it means that anything is wrong with them. But I just wanted to just address that, because sometimes there are, I think, legitimate reasons why women would not offer to pay in some circumstances. But we can go back.
I think as we move towards a more egalitarian society where we want equal rights and so on, right? It shouldn't be a problem to ask. The beauty is in the gesture, So it's not that you have to pay, but as you were saying, right? It's nice to be offered or given the opportunity.
And one of the guys. Go ahead.
Let me just say this.
Hold on, but what's a red flag for you? You didn't say
If
that.
you've been dating a relationship long enough, like as a woman, spending money on somebody just come like
Naturally.
natural.
Yes,
It just
it does.
happens. Oh, let's go here. I'll take you here. This, that. Are you spending your money? And that's not an issue for the person because they like you. That's what they want to do. But
I hear your own.
I was going to say, one of my mentors, he says, if he doesn't pay, throw him in the trash. And if she doesn't offer to pay, throw in the trash as well. Anybody else has any other red flags?
It would be to piggyback off of what they said, financial management. Like, you need to observe, like, whenever you're in a relationship or a situationship, right? Just pay a keen attention to what the person's doing. If you can't manage 1,000, it ain't got no way that you will be managing 100,000.
But
Yeah, Gabby.
oh,
Red flags.
If the person can't save, and this might sound weird, but I just feel weird if people don't have a bank account or something going on. Like, you know, it instantly says like maybe I wonder if they're saving, if they're even thinking about. I start to think about the future and all of these things in my head. So no, I know that, right? But it's just something that comes off to me.
But then realistically, not everybody can afford to save.
Yeah, good point.
Not
One of my red flags is
Most people can make the effort though.
people, I mean, not necessarily, people feeling entitled to other people's money. So there are some guys who feel entitled to the money that the women make. You said borrowing. There's some guys that always want to borrow money from their girlfriends and are upset if the girlfriend doesn't want to lend. Entitlement. Similarly, and I've never experienced this personally, but this would be a red flag. Anyone feeling entitled to the little money, the little peanuts that I make, and you have these statements. So you want to have a girlfriend and you don't pay for her to do her hair, and pay for her to do her nails and buy her clothes, and it baffles my mind because. Do you not have a job to do your own nails and hair? Yeah. Not saying I won't pay for it, but is it my responsibility to do that? I don't.
Did she give you
so you don't want to do it all the time?
That's it.
You do it sometimes.
No, you do it when you want to do it,
Yeah.
not because you have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I was saying. The beauty is in the gesture.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, if I offer to take you out, I am always prepared to pay because to me that just makes sense. Even if you say let's go out, I'm also prepared to pay. If you say, if I can't afford to pay, I say, well, little Brooks, this week we can't go nowhere. Or you know what? Make it a gas because you know what? That's a hidden cost sometimes. People don't consider the gas. Yeah, for folks who drive, well, I recently started. It's one of the things I realized. I'm not just dating, but generally speaking, gas and the price for oil gone up and so on. So, I think this is something a lot of people don't appreciate. Men even because you want to drive, especially if you, and this is why it doesn't pay to have to date several women unless you're financially comfortable. You gotta drive to go these various places. You gotta take these various women out on dates, and you're putting yourself in a hole just to feel sexual gratification. Doesn't make sense.
I think for me, I'm less inclined to give a woman money for her personal needs. Like you mentioned, doing her hair, doing her nails. I'm not saying that I wouldn't, but if she asks me to pay her tuition fees or help her with a business, she's gonna get my money right away. But if it's to do her nails and those stuff, there will be serious contemplation before I am.
But you realize that's more money though.
I know it's more money, right? But it's helping her development, it's helping her elevation, and in the end I might benefit too.
True.
I think his idea is that you can probably afford to pay your own nails as
And then maybe if you invest in her, she could do her nails as often as she wants on her own.
And she could buy better gifts for me as well.
Right.
Look, you know what? If I need a woman to pay for my haircuts, I have no business being with a woman. And this is consistently, right? Man, that's just me. If I need someone to always be putting gas in a car that I drive, I don't have a business having a car in the first place and even driving anybody about. That is how I treat myself. And like I said, it's a very unpopular view. I've had women who have told me, oh, you're mean, I wouldn't advise any of my female friends to date you. And I say, good. Tell the others so they will stay away as well. Yeah, because I've dated very good women before and I've had an issue with that ideology because they understand it's not that I'm saying that I would not. It's just I have no obligation.
Beautiful. One thing that I want to encourage you guys to spend your money on is to get one of these Common Sense jerseys or hoodies, and they're going to be available from, they were already available from today. So you can go down to OMOU store located at right next to Tower at the side, and you can get a jersey or a hoodie as a gift for your boo for Valentine's, right? I wanna have them in any color that you want, you can get, right? There are also other designs. One of my favorite, there's one called Girls Wanna Have Funs, right? That one is specifically made for the ladies. And the men can buy them for the ladies, you know, right? So I want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Next week, we're going to be having some married couples on the show. And tonight we touched on relationships and dating, but we're going deep into marriage now and how that entire situation works out.
Excellent.
So stay tuned to Common Sense for more amazing shows, and do have a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you.
Nah snatch no chain, nah rob nobody. Use the lessons me learn from mommy. Can't be a failure, gotta be somebody, gotta make some money. Yeah. Common sense, you can't be a dunstug, you gotta get sense. Save every dollar, make investments. Can't surround yourself with bare silly friends. Watch Common Sense with Matthew. Facebook, Instagram, plus YouTube. Get some lookers hate and link with your crew. Money conversations is what we do. Gosh. Common sense, you can't be a dunstug, you gotta get sense.